The United States is now openly admitting that they are tracking Bitcoin and crypto and using potentially stablecoins as a backdoor way to implement CBDCs. Now, I know that this sounds crazy, but when you look at the connections between the two major stablecoin players and what we are seeing with the United States government, it makes you think, especially when a recent study that just came out revealed what we've been saying on this very channel for quite some time. But first, let's dive in to what we've seen from the SEC. Of course, they have not been very cooperative or friendly to the Bitcoin and crypto space since it's been implemented. Of course, we had Gary Gensler, who is one of Bitcoin's biggest enemies at some point in time, but now they're essentially educating everybody in the SEC about these crypto wallets, which I think is very interesting because they're now telling them about custody and what that means for where Bitcoin is. And of course, we all know that all of these, let's call them crypto casinos, I'll be nice and friendly here in these first couple minutes, they all track KYC, or know your customer. And now, why do they do that? They do this in order to tax you on these moves from your Bitcoin, either to cold storage. They want to know where that Bitcoin is going. That's been the biggest thing. I've been saying it for a long time that the government doesn't hate Bitcoin. They just want to know what you're doing with it. They want to know if you're trying to spend it. They want to know if you are moving it into cold storage. They want to know all these different things about where you're moving your money. Also, they don't lose control. And so they can control it. So the IRS has been tracking, let's call it crypto, for quite some time. And they've been tracking it just for the United States, data. And they're publishing all of this reports on there. And the interesting thing is that, why do we necessarily need KYC, right? This goes back to banking data and looking at KYC, because KYC has been or know your customer has been a common practice in the banking industry for some time. And we've been fed the narrative that KYC stops money laundering and all of these different things. But has it really done what it's laid out to be, right? They've said, oh, all of these places, they've complied with it. It helps verify identities to comply with anti-money laundering laws, prevent fraud, terrorism financing, and other financial crimes. But let's be honest here. How many bank accounts have really been flagged for all of these things that I'm lining out here? 2,469. So less than 2,500 have been flagged for money laundering laws within this past year, right? And so, okay, a measly 17.5 million have been done for money mules. But on the flip side of things, what have we seen out of the crypto industry? And I'm saying crypto for a specific reason, because we're looking at CBDCs or we're looking at stablecoins here, right? I showed you guys 17.5 million from being money laundered by mules. We've had, and that's in a 3-month period. So even if you extrapolate that out for an entire year, 3.3 billion in USDT. Now, that is dramatically a higher number than what we're seeing just from traditional banks. And let's be honest here. I am a full proponent, and I think adoption is coming very quickly, but the amount of transactions with stablecoins is significantly less than with dollars. I mean, it's just plain and simple here. The banks have way more transactions going back and forth. There's a lot more money being moved back and forth through banks than there are through these stablecoins. But the stablecoin freezing of accounts is significantly higher at 3.3 billion. Now, Tether and Circle froze 3.3 billion, 109 in crypto, from 2023 and 2025. And the interesting thing is that these guys, right, it shows the major difference in how these two large issuers go through it, right? Tether, USDT, that stablecoin, it's already blacklisted nearly 7,200, 7,300 accounts. That is Literally, like I showed you guys, that's more than 3 times or almost 3 times the amount of accounts that we've seen from this crackdown here, right? And there's a lot less Tether accounts than there are bank accounts in the world, let's be honest here, right? And so Tether's freezing and reissuance mechanisms have returned millions of dollars. Yeah, right? I mean, they're protecting us. But if we really look at, how the banking industry regulates all of this, it is very scary. I did a full video on the rules or the SARs, which essentially just lines out how these banking industries are looking at bank accounts, right? I mean, they've flagged anything from literally you doing a transaction saying MAGA or Trump years ago. But there's a thing called a SAR report, a specific activity report. And it's estimated that just about 4.6 to 4.7 million SARS reports are filed every single year. I mean, we've seen Jack Mallers already get his bank account frozen. We've seen, the banking industry come out and attack Bitcoin CEOs already. And most notably, a lot of people that they just didn't like what they had to say. And so we've seen these things get flagged. And 90% of the time, 95, maybe even 99% of the time, they don't allow the banks to tell these people who are getting their accounts frozen why they get their accounts frozen. It just happens, right? You wake up one day, you don't have access to your money. Now, originally, Bitcoin was a freedom movement. This was all a part of the ethos of Bitcoin. And I think as Bitcoiners, we've gotten our eye off the ball a little bit. We're looking at it, okay, we've got a very crypto-friendly administration in here. But if you look at it, right, we've had the Samurai wallet developers arrested and, really no justice there for creating code. We've got, now potentially these stable coins really getting intertwined with the United States government. And I think that this intertwining that I'm going to line out through the rest of this video is very, let's call it just suspicious to say the very least, because now banking industries, they've had to file different ways in order to freeze bank accounts. Usually it took some bit of time. Well, Tether and Circle, because they all hold all of these US treasuries so closely, and they're smaller companies, let's face it. I mean, Tether has one of the best business models in the world because they have like maybe 8 employees and they're multi-billions of dollars in revenue. But if you come and look at it, well, you have 8 employees. You got to make one phone call. Hey, freeze this account and it's done. And that's what I think that the reason why we've seen the Genius Act get passed so quickly. Because if you really break down the Genius Act and what that was really quickly, I mean, it just established this framework for stablecoins. And that was the biggest thing. And if you guys all recall at the Bitcoin conference there, a couple months ago in Vegas, they were joking, calling it the Stablecoin conference because this was all everybody was talking about. Stablecoin this, stablecoin. But, I've had Checkmatey on the podcast, and if you look at the amount of, government debt that these stablecoins are buying, right? And it's essentially forced in. This Genius Act essentially says, if you want to do business with the dollar, and every single stablecoin around the world wants to use the dollar, there's not going to be a stablecoin of the Turkish lira or a stablecoin of the Argentinian peso because it's just too volatile compared to these other fiat currencies. The dollar is the best fiat currency there is. Let's just face it here, folks. So all of these stablecoins are trying to go into that realm. And in order to do business like that, you need to be holding US government debt. So Argentina and the Turkish lira, all these players who are not going to be using their hyperinflated currency are essentially going to be funding the US Ponzi machine with all of this, because they're going to essentially be utilizing the transactions of the US dollar. They're going to be using USDT or USAT or Circle. They're going to be using one of these things, and it's going to allow Tether to go and buy more US debt. And then the US isn't going to have to worry about Japan or China or all these relationships that they have around the world in order to finance their debt. And let's just face it, the US keeps going into this debt spiral. So the US has an incentive to keep pushing these stablecoin issuers. And these stablecoin issuers have an incentive to work very closely with the United States government. Because if they don't, right, then they're losing their entire business model. So we've already seen it with Circle, Tether, and the two biggest, right? They've been, quote, proactive in freezing accounts. And they've been, very, let's say, cooperative with these three-letter agencies in the United States. Oh, they said they're larger because more illicit and high-risk activity is denominated in that. That's what everybody's saying, right? But if you keep looking, USDT is frozen 30 times more often because Tether is stricter. And USDT is the asset, criminals, choose most. Allegedly, right? That's what they're always going to point to. But if you look at the number of SARs, right? Like I showed you, the specific activities report, there's like 4.6 to 4.7 million of those reports filed every single year. And 2,500 in a quarter are looked at as money laundering based accounts. But it goes deeper than just this, folks, because the United States is now moving towards a potentially Orwellian phase. And I'm not saying this very lightly because I'm American. I'm all about the freedom. I voted for this administration. I hope that this isn't the case. But when you're lining out things like the United States partnering with the UK in this US-UK financial crypto partnership, right? It's literally called a joint task force to eliminate red tape for companies accessing capital markets. And what it is, it's called the Transatlantic Task Force. And it will look at enhanced collaborations and through frameworks of the digital markets. And it will be looking for ongoing, let's call it surveillance between the two, right? And, if we dig deeper, right, the UK has been going into this digital ID. I mean, we've had Keir Starmer essentially come out and said, if you want to work in the UK, you need a digital ID. And this is going to be enforced heavily across across the UK. And it's a policy that's shifted over from the EU. We're going to get into the EU here in a minute and dive into all of that because this freezing of the saving and freezing of accounts movement is literally spread all across the world at this point. And it doesn't seem to be slowing down one bit. And so this is why you need to be utilizing any kind of rails you can to get out of the banking system. One of the best places to do that is Salt. You can go to saltlending.com/green-candle or the link in the description, and they will give you guys a green candle, an exclusive offer if you go to Salt Lending, right? So go on down there. They have some of the best rates in the industry starting at 9.95% with a 1, 3, or 5-year duration. You could borrow up to 70% LTV. The best part about this, no credit checks, no prepayment fees, none of that. They have offers all over the place. And if you're a business owner too, they have business loans. You guys need to get yourselves out of the banking system as quickly as possible because to me, it's looking very grim, especially when you look at the signs all around this industry. I mean, I'm already pointing out the UK, the digital ID aspect, right? I mean, they're introducing this new digital ID scheme and everybody's saying, oh, you know what? It shouldn't be anything that we worry about in the United States. But if you continue to look now at how the UK and the US are very closely aligned here, federal agencies across the US explore digital IDs to prevent fraud, right? They've done it in Android phones already. States contracting with mobile driver's license. Digital IDs is not for everyone, but the US is starting to roll this out too. So this is not something that I think, we need to be looking at this, right? Now, when we keep diving in to how these, let's call it bail-ins and other things that we've seen, right? I mean, these banking accounts or these banking industries, they're just as crooked, if not more crooked, right? I mean, the Bank of England literally released this 4 years ago now, 4.5 years ago, literally lining out the plan of a bail-in, how they will steal your savings, right? And this is from the Bank of England. This is from the UK, the same UK that the United States is making this joint task force with, right? So as we're continuing to line it out, right? I mean, it's not like it's the UK and this is some craziness over there and it'll never come over to the United States. No, no, no. We're already starting to see this creep over. I mean, they're doing mobile and digital driver's license now for truck drivers in the United States. And what did we see just up north, right? In the Great White North, less than 5 years ago, we saw the Canadian truckers convoy, right? You had to do something to your body in order to work. The truckers protested and they got their bank accounts frozen. Well, now the United States is doing the same thing. Hey, get this digital ID so we can track these truck drivers wherever they're going, understand the routes, but we're doing it for their safety. We're doing it so we understand where everything is going around, right? Not so fast, my friend. So this is why I think you need to look at the policies across the pond to really get a full understanding, because the EU has been working on this digital euro for quite some time, right? So the EU looking at this and this issuance of the digital euro, if you listen to what Christine Lagarde has been saying, she's been really pushing for this legislation to rapidly get pushed farther and farther ahead. Now, I think that this is going to be, really something to watch here. And we've got some people in the chat asking how they may block buying Bitcoin in the future with the Genius Act. So the Genius Act isn't necessarily to block the buying of Bitcoin. What I'm aligning out here is the Genius Act is to really push stable coins forward. And the stable coins are something that really worry me because it essentially just pushes forward the debt Ponzi that the United States government has. So stable coins now are the number one rail to buy Bitcoin. You could also use the dollar in your bank accounts, but we've already seen that they've gone through that avenue to do Operation Choke Point 2.0. Now, JP Morgan, Citibank, and some of these other banks are facing fines for unjustly, debanking some people. But the Genius Act, the reason why they passed this really quickly is to keep financing that United States debt. So it's not necessarily that they're going to block Bitcoin buying. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that they want to track everything. They don't want you to get KYC free Bitcoin. They don't want you to have it in, a hardware wallet where they don't know where that is. They don't want you to get KYC free Bitcoin, which I think is the real kicker here, right? Because, I think that this is going to be something that, when I think, Trump is really big on the freedom, and I really hope, like I said a little bit earlier in this live stream, that Trump is going to turn this around and not necessarily allow for all of this. But I think that there's really smart people in the government that are looking at this, and Europe is, their own problem in itself. They've been already outwardly blaming the US for its payment problems, right? Even though it's absolutely ridiculous that this is the case, I think when you keep lining all of this out and you look at how the Europeans have been acting towards the United States, essentially the U.S. has been almost, lined out at war with everybody except for maybe Russia and China at this point. Because if you look at how the policies in Europe, I mean, the British Empire essentially just never ended. Because if you look, they still got their fingers all over our education system. They still got their fingers all over our banking system, all of our legacy financial systems. The British Empire, you can trace all that back to those roots, essentially, right? And if you look at the forefathers, the founders of the United States, they essentially said, banks are worse than cartels, and banks are worse than having standing armies here just ready to go and attack the United States. The banks are the real enemy. And so, okay, we pin each other with that. That was the whole message of Bitcoin in the crypto industry. I mean, that's what, Celsius, it blew up. But what can we take from what Celsius was doing? They were saying, unbank yourself. That was their biggest calling card, right? And it was a big marketing and successful marketing ploy that went from essentially a nothing company to multi-billion-dollar company in a few years. Of course, there was fluff and they were doing very nefarious things under it, but its marketing message worked so well that it had so many people buying on their platform. And so, I think that when you're looking at how the United States is looking at the quote unquote crypto industry, the push for stable coins is what really worries me. And, the connection between Tether and, and the United States government is another thing, right? I mean, Howard Lubnick here, he is the former president of Cantor Fitzgerald, right? Cantor Fitzgerald used to manage, or they used to manage Tether's money. I don't know if they still do necessarily, but when Howard Lubnick was the president, he had a very close connection. Actually, Elizabeth Warren even called him out for this. Look, I don't agree with like 99% of things Elizabeth Warren says, but she is maybe onto something with that, right? So Howard Lubnick has a very close connection. And of course, Tether and SoftBank and Jack Mallers in 21, they just became a publicly traded company. And they are like the number 3 in all of Bitcoin holdings, I believe. Let's see. They're maybe number 3 or they're number 3 in all of Bitcoin treasury holdings at 43,000. And their thing is they're going to buy businesses that are going to be profitable so they could buy more Bitcoin and keep servicing their debt. But it's essentially, Jack Mallers said, hey, you guys got to trust us at this point to say that we are going to buy profitable companies. Look, they don't have any cash flows yet. So I'm not saying that this is going to be one giant flop. It's for me, it's more of a wait and see type of thing. I'd love to have Jack and kind of talk with him a little bit on the pod and stuff, all this, but and he hasn't done anything that I would say has led me to believe that he's not going to be able to do this. But the connection with Tether and Cantor Fitzgerald really does worry me because, now this company went from nothing to 43,000 Bitcoin, and then now they're publicly traded. And if you look at Tether as well, Tether appointed the former White House Crypto Council Executive Director, Bo Hines, for the strategic advisor for digital assets and U.S. strategy. So essentially the CEO of USAT, or Tether's now arm for their stablecoin, right? Because USDT didn't meet the United States regulations. So USAT now is a separate one. I mean, the volume, I showed you guys earlier, the volume on USDT is 30 times higher than it is on Circle, but they have much more stringent policies. You just freeze everything at some point. And even though they were so compliant, the US was still like, hey, we need you guys to make another stable coin that will fit all of this. Right? So I think once you kind of connect all of these dots and see where it's going, you line out that this is really the only thing you could do is buy Bitcoin at this point and hold it in cold storage. You need to buy it and hold it in the safest place possible. And there's 2 ways to do that. or there's two things you need to do that. You need a Trezor hardware wallet. They're doing an exclusive sale here for the holidays. Holiday sale up to 30% off, free shipping with the code holiday25. You guys got to go to the affiliate link down below, but you got to get yourself a hardware wallet and get your Bitcoin off an exchange. You can't hold it on a Coinbase. You can't hold it on any of these platforms, because if they could freeze your bank accounts, and Coinbase is now regulated by the SEC, they could freeze your Coinbase account easily. So you guys need to go there. I have a Trezor Safe 7 that I'm using in order to hold mine. And because I travel so much, they've got a great Bluetooth feature on the Trezor Safe 7. And it's free shipping now with the code holiday25. So make sure you guys go and get that right there. But you cannot stop there. Why? Well, because if you write it on a piece of paper, like I've got right here, and your dog gets a hold of it, or you just rip it by accident, your mom doesn't know what these 12 words are, so she goes and throws them away. Something happens, right? You could lose your generational wealth forever. And the thing I love about this crypto steel case here is that it has this screw, right? But you could buy a tamper seal on here. And if you use the promo code green candle and the link below, it's cryptosteel.com/green candle. If you use promo code green candle, you'll get 10% off. And you buy one of these cases, but buy it with a tamper seal, so you know if somebody has looked at your seed phrase. Because all of these other punch plates, if you just have it in a safe and somebody for some reason knows the code to your safe, they open that and they look at it, they could put it back in there. And if you don't check, they could steal all your Bitcoin without you even having any idea. So I think that those are the two safest ways to, back up your Bitcoin. And you guys got to do this quickly, right? Figure out how to hold your Bitcoin and do it securely. Because if you don't, they are all monitoring all of this. Figure out how to trade and get some KYC free sats. Look, I don't think the US is a tyrant country as we're seeing there. But, I think cold storage here. Here's the thing, folks. Bitcoin is peer-to-peer cash, right? If the US government says that they don't like Bitcoin, I could still go to somebody down the street. I know somebody that will accept Bitcoin for meat. I know somebody that will accept Bitcoin for shelter. There's plenty of places that would, plenty of Bitcoiners around that realize that this is the truest form of hard money. I mean, there's 21 million Bitcoin, right? And if you look at the wallet distribution, we are still so early. I mean, literally, there are like 92% of wallets have less than 0.1 Bitcoin, which is $10,000, less than $10,000. There's not even 4 million wallets that have more than 10 grand worth of Bitcoin right now. So we are still extremely early. I think the shift is going to be from, just the traditional Bitcoiners to people really realizing just how fixed this digital supply is. McLovin, I know you're trolling in the chat, but don't fool everybody, brother. You can't be selling all your Bitcoin for gold at this point. Jules, you said that they're going to revalue gold and kick the can down the road. I mean, to be honest, with this revaluation of gold, I think it is kind of a far-fetched idea. I personally don't think that they're going to do that, because it takes so much time. I mean, think about that. You have to go and test all of the gold. And if you do a random test, how are you going to know if it's legit? Right? So as we're continuing to look at, more Bitcoin, or more gold, chances to continue to buy gold, right? Or to revaluate gold, excuse me. I think that, they're not going to do it just because of the time it takes. Governments are extremely slow and inefficient. So, Paris is saying Trump say to buy Bitcoin. I mean, Eric Trump, here's I don't know. You guys tell me if there's that good audio.
In the crypto space, there's nothing I believe in more. And guys, I see it. I mean, I think the advantage of kind of being a little bit diversified and seeing the rest of the world and understanding hard assets is everywhere I go. I mean, I've had major sovereign wealth funds tell me that, I've had governments of countries tell me that all the power that they're not using in the winter months that would otherwise be used to cool their cities, to cool their high rises, are being put into mining Bitcoin, right? I mean, it's something that every...
So you see, I mean, Trump's are lining out that this is, but the unique thing about mining Bitcoin is that is all KYC free. Obviously I've got simple mining. I'll go into them here in a little bit, but the unique thing that I think I'm lining out here is that all of these corporations, all of these, giant sovereign wealth funds companies, we're seeing a lot of major buyers come on in, and they're buying Bitcoin. And they are scooping up a ton of this Bitcoin, and they're doing it at a very rapid pace. But the unique thing of it is they're not announcing it, right? They're trying to keep it on the down low. They're trying to tell us all, hey, you know what? This Bitcoin thing, it's interesting. But they're staying very quiet about whether or not they're doing it. And this is why I think, we're going to start to see these sovereign wealth funds, these big players, Trump being this crypto president, all of these guys, we're going to start to see and hear more in 26 about who's actually buying Bitcoin. And I honestly don't think that we'll start to see this FOMO for another couple years from governments. Paris says that he's a miner. Look, if you guys want to mine, you guys can go to simplemining.io/greencandle. Go on down there. They'll give you guys 7 free days of it. And then, you can get KYC free sats. I know it's coming towards the end of the year. If you guys need a tax break or something, you could buy a depreciation from the miner. Do all this stuff. I mean, the IRS is already tracking your crypto, right? Crypto wallet. It pains me to say that word, to be honest with you. But the thing that I am really worried about here, folks, is just how they are tracking all of these stable coins. So find ways like simple mining to get your Bitcoin KYC free. Do it quickly. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Hit the like button for me. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of all of this. And don't forget, I just dropped an amazing episode where we went into detail about what is going on at the EU with all of this with my good friend of the channel, Luke Mikic. So go on to there. So go straight from here. Go check out that video, and I'll catch you guys all at the next one.